Hello, you've reached episode 8 of the podcast series, The Question of God. Has our civilization outgrown God? My name is Sophie Minerva. I'm a professor of philosophy at NLA University College in Oslo. This podcast series is the result of a pedagogical experiment I conducted last year. The recording you are listening to is from cafe conversations I had with 4 students about questions related to God. They represented different positions on the God question. 12 episodes in all have been made from the conversations. Our starting point was the book Outgrowing God by the well-known atheist Richard Dawkins. His claim is that our Western civilization has outgrown God. Is it true? The topic this 8th time is about the concepts of science and faith and the relationship between them. Could we say that science and faith are different paths to knowledge? Does science then provide more certain knowledge than faith does? Let's join the conversation in the cafe. I'd like to welcome you back again to this discussion about science and faith based on Dawkins' book, Outgrowing God. Astrid, I asked you to prepare a short introduction. You are ready.
Yes, Professor Sophie. Okay. We have already talked about faith in previous meetings, but I thought it would be useful now to start with a definition of the word science. It seems hard to define what science really is, but English philosopher Peter S. Williams says that, quote, "The natural sciences are a set of fallible disciplines in which humans seek to understand, explain, and/or predict as much as they can about physical realities, especially by paying attention to how empirical experience can confirm or undermine truth claims about physical realities," unquote. Now, Dawkins makes a big distinction between science and faith, right? But even scientists can't work without trusting or believing in things that can't be verified by evidence. We have talked about this before, but I can repeat some of the examples of what scientists believe. Scientists believe in logic and maths, and in their own ability to reason. They believe that their memories and physical senses are generally reliable. They assume that other people also have minds, and that the physical world has a real, objective existence. It's not just an illusion. Scientists also make moral assumptions, for example, that investigators should be truthful when reporting their results. These are all rational, properly basic beliefs that can't be established by science, because science depends upon them, right? So Dawkins' sharp distinction between science and faith, and therefore also his distinction between science and religion, looks very suspect. Both science and Christian faith, for example, require properly basic beliefs. Both the lab and the cathedral, to put it like that, represent systems of thought that build on properly basic beliefs. Both areas are using reason and evidence to find truth. The Indian philosopher Vishal Mangalwadi said, quote, "The scientific perspective flowered in Europe as an outworking of medieval biblical theology nurtured by the Church. The Bible created and underpinned the scientific outlook," unquote.
Thank you, Astrid. You even quoted an Indian philosopher. I appreciate that. Yes, Hiromi, you have a comment?
Yes, I think it's easy to use different standards when you have a strong bias for or against something, such as your views on religion. When Dawkins talks about his faith in science, there are a lot of things he can't prove, even in his own field of biology. But that's obviously not a problem for him. Yet, when he talks about religion, anything that isn't proven is suddenly a big problem. I think that actually says more about Dawkins' attitude than the religion he is commenting on.
Okay, thanks, Hiromi. So, you and Astrid have pointed out that scientists also need to believe some unprovable aspects of reality to be able to do their work. It's a good point. But even if scientists need to believe in these things, can't we say that science still is the best way we know to obtain knowledge? What do you think? Yes, Astrid.
I think the one is built upon the other. So I don't think you can say that science is a better way to knowledge. Science is based on the properly basic philosophical knowledge that is already there. Science is built upon certain beliefs. It's depending on it, isn't it?
Good point, Astrid. Yes, Douglas.
Yeah, I think Dawkins generalizes too much. Science has good methods for studying natural phenomena, but studying people and society is not so easy, because it often involves trusting people's testimony. What researchers themselves believe also shapes their research, and it can certainly influence the interpretation of their results.
Thanks, Douglas. What about you, Thomas? Any comments?
Well, I admit that Dawkins seems to treat science as just one single thing, which is too simple, I guess. As far as I understand, science can also be treated as a philosophy, and different sciences have different methods for studying different things. Isn't that right? I also have the impression that there often is competition between different sciences, different researchers, different methods. They compete in obtaining and interpreting data, in publishing papers, developing new models, developing technology, obtaining research funding, in protecting their professional authority, and so on.
I'm impressed, Thomas.
Wow, thanks, Douglas. That means a lot, especially coming from you.
We have an old saying in Norwegian that means something like, the learned will always disagree. I think science is like that. It's an ever-ongoing discourse between experts, and often before an audience of both enthusiasts and skeptics.
Yeah, exactly. In the media, we often hear, science says. But that's a bit misleading. It's always people who say something. Scientists are people. And when some scientists say something, there are often other scientists who disagree with them. You can have more or less of a consensus, of course, but we know from history and experience that even the consensus can be wrong.
I hear you, Douglas, but nothing is perfect, right? And what's the alternative to science?
What is the alternative? Well, I think the question is wrong. Like what we just said, scientific beliefs are built upon other beliefs. They are not alternatives. We are talking about finding truth, right? Dawkins is advocating the idea that society should only be based on scientific beliefs about reality. Claims that cannot be verified scientifically should not matter, he thinks. People are free to believe what they want in private, but society cannot be based on assumptions that can't be verified. That's his reasoning. So, his idea is that this principle, this social contract, so to speak, must be accepted by everyone, regardless of their worldview. So, what about religion in society? When it comes to religion, it's purely a private matter for him. Religious claims can never be scientifically verified. For example, how can you prove scientifically that God exists, or that Jesus is the Son of God, or that there is life after death? Therefore, all these things belong to the private sphere and are for each individual to decide. Here I agree with him. Society or the state cannot impose certain beliefs on the population. That is why we in the US have a distinction between what is the public domain of the secular state and what is the private domain of religion. For example, we don't have a state religion. That's in our constitution. The state must be neutral in matters of religious belief. In Norway, you may not have such a sharp division between state and church. Isn't that right, Astrid? You have a state religion and a state church, right?
We used to have, but not anymore. In Norway, we would say that we have a 1,000-year-long Christian and humanist heritage, which is also referred to in the Norwegian constitution as the basis for our values and traditions. But I think you're wrong about the idea of the public-private sphere. Religion is a source of values that is permeated throughout society and affects everything. What are the values and traditions of the United States?
They are mostly similar to those in Norway. That's why we can work so easily together, I guess. But why do you think I'm wrong?
Well, the Declaration of Independence is based on religious principles, isn't it? I have it here. Listen to this quote. "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness," unquote. In other words, American society and politics has been influenced by religious beliefs from the beginning, even though the Constitution prevents the government from establishing a church or favoring one religion over another. And also remember, like we talked about last time, there are good reasons to think God's existence can be argued for as the best explanation of reality. In fact, I think many Christian truth claims can be argued for on the basis of historical and empirical evidence.
Okay, Astrid, I think you may have a point about the religious beliefs of the politicians who founded the United States, but the Constitution says that, quote, Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion or prohibiting the free exercise thereof, unquote.
Sure, that's right, but that's another question. I guess your American ancestors learned a lesson from the religious wars in Europe. The state shouldn't decide what creed or confession of faith an individual citizen should have. Choice of creed or denomination should be a private matter. But that doesn't mean religious beliefs aren't allowed to influence public behavior or participate in public debate. After all, the state was founded on the assumption that God underpins certain moral principles that apply to all people. So, the state is neutral in relation to religions, but it was founded on certain philosophical perceptions of reality. Do you see the difference?
Let me say something here. Isn't it important that the world comes to terms with outdated religion and instead holds on to universal values that everyone can agree on, such as human rights? Think about how much conflict and war religion has caused through history.
Thomas, you seem to think that everyone in the world agree on and respect human rights. Is that what you think is happening?
I have a comment here. I've thought about this for some time. Religion can be a source of conflict, yes, but it can also be a bridge to reconciliation. It can be an instrument of oppression, but it can also be an inspiration for the oppressed to fight for their freedom, right? I think it is the underlying worldview behind the politics that matters and the values they represent. You mentioned religious wars, Thomas, but what about anti-religious oppression and persecution? Think about how much suffering atheist regimes have inflicted on the world, like the authoritarian communist regimes of the 20th century. Millions have suffered and died. It's happening even today. Conflicts happen for all kinds of reasons. What can provide a solution, a common path for peace? Isn't it the belief in common basic values? The UN Declaration of Human Rights says, quote, the inherent dignity and of the equal and inalienable rights of all members of the human family is a foundation of freedom, justice, and peace in the world, unquote. This is a declaration of something we are encouraged to believe, but it's not something that can be arrived at through science. I think everybody knows that.
Thanks, Hiromi. I am glad you brought in the subject of human rights. It is very relevant here. The UN's Universal Declaration of Human Rights didn't come out of nowhere. It is based on certain beliefs and values that people have, in principle, agreed to abide by. The fact that so many countries have signed the declaration is a source of hope for the world. Yet, there is still much conflict and oppression. It can be a long way from words to deeds. Thank you also, Astrid and Douglas. You had some interesting perspectives on state and religion. States are often not as neutral in these matters as they claim to be, as we have seen many times. I would recommend to read John Locke, Thomas Paine, and John Stuart Mill on this topic. Okay, everyone, this is it for now. Next time, we'll talk about evolution. Until then, you need to read and think about the next 2 chapters. Thomas, will you give us the introduction next time, okay? Good. Thank you, Thomas. I look forward to it. Okay, see you then. You have been listening to The Question of God. Has our civilization outgrown God? A 12-episode podcast series from Biocosmos Norway and Damaris Norway. You can find references and resources online. The script by Berge Elliott Benson and Peter S. Williams was adapted from parts of the book Outgrowing God, A Beginner's Guide to Richard Dawkins, and the God Debate by Peter S. Williams, who also composed the music. All voices, including mine, were performed using AI. The sound editor was Berge Elliott Benson,